Well, so I'm from Oklahoma originally. I went to the University of Oklahoma and got a bachelor in film and video studies there. And I would say, as far as why I'm doing this, maybe it's not the most encouraging thing, but if anyone wants to be a filmmaker, I would say to some degree, if you can do anything else, do it, because you have to really be compelled, as you guys know, with everything that you're doing as well. You have to really, really have it in your blood. It's got to be in your heart. It's got to be absolutely, you wake up and you think, what can I do toward this goal today? I mean, it just really has to be that way. And so I've had that passion since I was really a little kid. I wasn't quite sure exactly, what aspect of art it would take, but I've always been interested in art, and pretty quickly I gravitated to film, to movies. So the reason I do what I do is because I'm just sort of compelled to. It's sort of a thing that if I don't do it, I really miss it. And I tried real hard to be a normal guy. I tried all the traditional occupations, but it just didn't take, for various reasons.
So speaking of which, you wrote from personal experience your character in Sunny and Mexican Moon going to all of those job interviews.
Absolutely correct. Yeah, I mean that's definitely our to some degree our life is going to inform our art, and so this is a fictionalized, obviously, account of to a degree my real life experience of I wasn't a mechanic, and I'm not prior military, but as far as just being a mechanic and then trying to get a job at a bank, and then the guy looking over I did try to get a job in financial services many years ago. And the person who was interviewing me finally just kind of said, well, I mean, basically, do you really want to do this? Because they were looking at my background, well, you studied film and journalism and all this kind of stuff. And of course, you're trying to, you need the job, you want the job, so you're trying to think, well, yes, this financial services would be awesome. But in your heart, that's probably not the right path for you personally. And so yes, that did definitely inform the character Sonny to a large degree, where he's basically being turned down at trying to be a regular guy, so he finally just has to do the only thing he knows how to do, which in this case is fight.
Right. Yeah. Well, tell us about what compelled you to want to make a film during the pandemic.
Well, so that's an excellent question. I guess the first answer is when I set out to make the film, there was no such thing as a pandemic. There really wasn't. It was, in fact, in the film, one of the opening scenes when everybody's in that kind of West Texas bar and they're line dancing and all that stuff, that's actually legitimately pre-pandemic. So at that particular time, we were hearing, very distant sort of rumblings about what might be, on the horizon with COVID, but it seemed a million miles away, and we just really had no actual point of reference for it. And you can see in the way that sequence is shot, everybody's at tables and they're fellowshipping and they're dancing and they're drinking beer and they're talking and having all their conversations. And it feels like life used to be, just a year ago, right? A year and a half ago. And so then pretty quickly after that, though, the film gets very stark in terms of just the isolation. There's a lot of single shots of characters. The town looks like a post-apocalyptic kind of situation where everybody's empty, the streets are empty and all that. So when I set out, there wasn't a pandemic, but then there was, after only 2 weekends of shooting, we encountered it.
Wow.
Did the pandemic switch or change the script at all? Did you say, hey, I got to sit back a few weeks and, because we're not going to have people around, or, locations weren't going to be available that were previously available? Did you switch any of the script around, or no?
No, the script really didn't change it. It really worked out because I was planning on shooting with a skeleton crew anyway, with no more than a couple of cast members at any particular time, and the story itself was so simple. I intentionally wrote just a very, very simple story with not a lot of moving parts, and so fortunately I didn't have to really adapt the script to the real life situation we were facing too much.
How did the town feel about you shooting? You shot a lot, majority of it all in one town. Mm-hmm. What were they like before the pandemic when you were approaching them, and then when the pandemic hit, did they change any of their parameters of what you could do, or did they just say, well, go ahead, there's no one out here, don't worry?
Well, the town was Hyco, Texas, and so you guys may be familiar with it, but it's just a wonderful place. I have to give them a huge shout out. Linda Stern and Lucy and Philippa Vasquez own the RV trailer park we shot in, but the town was just everything short of making me a temporary mayor and opening the town to shoot. So they were very sweet, very wonderful, very gracious. And because Heiko has, you know, approximately 1,300 people, it's kind of off the beaten path, and it just feels anyway like you're going back in time. And so it felt pretty far removed from the whole COVID situation. We did always follow the, you know, the state guidelines, and so talking to my representatives there at Heiko, they had the guidelines, of course, with the state that we had to still follow those, and we were careful with that. But as far as their attitude in general, they were very, as long as we stuck within the protocol, they were very laid back, very relaxed, and it was just really cool to be almost just like traveling outside of the quarantine, even though it was raging all around us. But out in this little Texas town, it was just kind of like things used to be.
So did you have to pause filming at all, or were you able to forge ahead?
We had to shut down production for about 3.5 months for the quarantine. Yeah, and my mom was actually with me. She helped a lot, and we were. I'm from Oklahoma, like I mentioned, so we went back to Oklahoma during the quarantine, and it was a very bizarre feeling because I was getting clothes out of my dresser and everything, and it felt like we were running for our lives because we didn't, like this nuclear mushroom cloud has come in our direction, and we didn't at the time know anything. You're hearing, you know, people in their 40s are dying, people in their 20s are dying, everyone's dying, elderly people, pre-existing conditions, not pre-existing conditions, and at that time information was just all over the place, and everyone was trying to figure out what's happening. And I remember I think it was in England, they were playing Nearer My God to Thee, like on the Titanic, right? There's some orchestra was, it was ominous. We all lived through it together. I mean, you guys know, it was really ominous. And so yeah, we shut down production. I talked to my casting director, Keena Bell Reed, who was very, very instrumental in making the film. And actually the weekend after we shot that big bar scene I mentioned everybody was around, she kind of pulled me aside and she said, I got a really ominous feeling about this. She had like a really bad gut feeling, like this is something's coming. And so talking to her pretty quickly, we realized even before they had issued all the official quarantine stuff, we need to just stop production because we don't know what's going on. So we did stop for about 3.5 months, and then once I was in contact with the State Film Commission, and once they were starting to open things back up a little bit, after about 3.5 months, I sort of, like, you know, in the Fox, so I put my head up a little bit and looked around, and I kind of ventured out myself to Heiko and got some B-roll and tried to, you know, get some momentum going up again and scout it out. And unfortunately, we were able with a small crew to proceed after about 3.5 months of quarantine.
Let me ask you this, you're from Oklahoma, very proud, you went to OU. Why not Kingston or Medill or Norman? Why did you pick Heiko and not a small town in Oklahoma?
There's something, and I am proud of Oklahoma, I love Oklahoma, but there's something about Texas, especially for this particular story, there's that crime fiction. What I call Texas noir, I didn't make the term up, but I've heard that, you know, like Blood Simple with the Coen brothers, just that whole Texas noir thing, there's something about Texas. And I mentioned this a while back in an interview I did with John Wildman, but he said kind of a similar question, why Texas, what is it about Texas? And I said, well, there's an interview I saw a while back with Andre the Giant on Letterman, one of the years ago in the 80s. But he said, he asked Andre the Giant, in France, what is it over there that they know about Americans? What's the one thing they all know? And he looked at the camera, and Andre the Giant goes, Texas, you know, like. And there's just something, you know, like it or not, right? That's you know, you go abroad from what I can tell, and there's definitely something about the cowboy aesthetic, the cowboy hat, the state of Texas, the Lone Star State, and so to me it was just even though Oklahoma would work as well to a degree, there's something special about Texas for this particular type of story, I think.
Well, and you shot your first film here too.
I did, yes, yeah.
Yeah, but that was out in West Texas.
Mostly, yeah. We did a lot of studio work in Fort Worth, but then all the establishing shots, the B-roll was Terlingua, Texas, where they have the chili cook-off every year. Alpine, Texas, Marfa, which is, you know, turning into a pretty cool little arts place out there in Marfa. So.
Well, it does seem that the aesthetic of the film, you're kind of incorporating the backdrop as a character almost. I mean, you can really kind of sense that. So was you almost sense that maybe it couldn't have been filmed anywhere else in a way.
It really, yeah, it's exactly correct. And a lot of times, you know, when you're writing these stories, I'm sure as all of you know, when you're working on these kind of projects, it really does just sort of take on its own life and just says, this is where you're going to make me, this is it, you know, and so it does fit, and it became very much a character in the story, yeah.
Well, speaking of Texas, that Stetson you wear, the black Stetson, can you tell us a bit about that, your hat, and also hats in general in the film? I mean, for us Texans, hats are kind of a big deal,
yeah.
Especially Texas style compared to different states have very different hats.
Absolutely right. Yeah, you're right. And I don't want to pretend to be a hat expert, because then I'll be a fraud and everyone will figure it out. But no, you're absolutely right. And the hat, it's a piece of gear equipment for this specific iconic location in Texas. And a couple of things in the story. One of them was, I don't want to give too much away, but to people listening, but one of the older characters talking to Sonny at the very end, he sees him and he doesn't have his Stetson on, and he says, "Where's your hat?" And so that's very, very colloquial for this time, this region. When a guy goes into a place, if he's not wearing his hat, it's like, well, "Where's your hat?" That's part of your gear. And the reason I chose a black one was because it just kind of a reverse. It was typically, you think of the good guy with a white hat, but then having kind of a good guy wearing a black hat, just kind of throwing that cliche off a little bit and trying to do something a little bit different with the color of the hat.
It was amazing because he really does know best. This is for this area. I have no way. There's no way I would ever be able to get up and direct. I can set up a shoot schedule, but as far as that is, he knows. He's always had and this is mother talk, I guess. He's always had a gift, though, for doing film that is the setting the lights, and he wants a certain feel and being able to set up the scene and the shot. And I'm someone you can tell my pictures, like the ones I just took, they're going to be out of focus. So the one thing I did not do is run the camera.
So let me ask you this. In your previous life, you were a school teacher, and you said that your mother was a professor. How did you feel going from the school teacher side of your life to your son's Hollywood aspirations or filmmaking aspirations? I mean, what was that transition for you? Did you feel like you're fish out of water in the first couple of days, or did you
Actually, I did at first, for the first movie. Because he said he wanted me to do the shoot schedule, and I thought, okay, but it was very similar to a lot of what I did in school anyway. Because in school you set up your course, and you have to set up each day. So you put parameters and you set up, but. All my life it turns out I had a secret side I didn't know about. I always loved drama and film, and I've worked backstage, but when I taught world history, if you look back at what I did lots of plays, we did debates, we put different people on trial, and so I taught Latin, a play about some American kids who go back in time. So we actually wrote it and put it on, the kids and put it on the stage. So I guess I've always had an interest in that. I just never really appreciated it until I got into this.
Were you ever a student of your mom?
I had both of my parents in high school.
Wow, really?
Yes. So the answer is yes.
At the time we had lots of kids. So in other words, I knew all the ones he always, I had a lot of sons and daughters, let's say.
So when Chris came to you, if you don't mind me asking this kind of personal question, but when Chris came to you and said, hey, I want to go to OU, I want to study film, what was your reaction? Because when a lot of young people go to their parents and say, I want to do film or I want to get into the arts, it's like, no, you got to go into business. You got to get something that will earn you money. So tell me about, when he approached you that he wanted to get into the entertainment business, and what support did you give him and what advice did you give him?
Well, what we said is you need to have a backup plan.
You
And, at the time, filmmaking has changed quite a bit since then, but at the time, it looked like there were jobs available even if he didn't do film, which is the way he wanted. And so I thought, well, if that didn't, he could always go into one of those other areas. But he has tried to give it up, but it just seems like it's a miracle. There's a lot of prayer that went along in this. Absolutely, a lot of prayer. The Lord is very good.
Chris, when your mom is helping you on a film, do you feel like she's the most honest with you compared to the rest of your crew?
Yeah, and I have, like I mentioned, my casting director as well is brutally honest at times, but in a good way. So, but yeah, she's definitely honest. I can always trust her to give me the right answer and the honest answer. And then of course, I have such a small set, and I'm pretty careful about it. It's almost like picking a basketball team. Like you kind of pick in advance who's going to come on the team, and so I have a good bunch of personalities. But it is stressful, as you all know, and long hours. And so whenever, if we didn't have any outbursts or anything like that, but then just being stressed out and all that, and your judgment starts to go like, well, maybe I just don't need to worry about this shot, or maybe this person should, maybe I won't call them back for a couple of days and let them get a break from them. And then my mom's always like, no, just kept me very much on the straight and narrow, emotionally, not to because I was doing so many different jobs. Don't let your emotions run away with you, and still exercise good judgment and discernment, and so yeah, she was very honest and very good at that.
And your co-writer is your brother, is that right?
My dad, actually.
Oh,
yeah.
Your dad?
Okay. Omar Zuhdi, yeah.
Oh, okay. It's your dad. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What did he teach?
Latin and world history.
Oh, wow.
Ancient history, and he's his background, actually, he's an Egyptologist. He went to Johns Hopkins, and that was his big passion, was Egyptology. And that's to circle back to your question about their response when I wanted to do something like this, which is pretty abstract, to be polite. He understood it because he wanted to be an Egyptologist, and so that's my grandfather. His father was a heart surgeon, so that was pretty out of the norm for him, and he understood what my dad used to always tell me. You got to chase the dream. You got to do it. So if at some point it's just not in the cards, it's not working out, then you got to maybe think about doing something else. But at least if you have a chance, you have an opportunity, you need to chase the dream. And because he was in a similar situation with his dad when he had the passion for ancient Egypt, he kind of got it. So they were both really supportive.
So are you hoping to maybe use this and with this being a little bit bigger than your first film, are you kind of hoping to sort of keep that progression going to maybe use this as a springboard to bigger budgets and bigger projects, things like that?
I would hope so. The thing about getting more budget and that sort of thing is it's almost more rope to hang yourself with, and so I try to be real careful about keeping. I think Orson Welles said he wanted to keep as much control over his films as he could, not out of arrogance, but because his films only worked his way or they just didn't work at all. And there's something very personal about it. And if you start getting too big of a footprint, of course, you start losing some control, and the film's just, to me, it does kind of sacrifice a little bit. So I would like it to get bigger each time and make a bigger charge each time and have a bigger footprint, but maybe to a point, because I do like Truffaut and that whole school of thought with the auteur theory that a film really should be like a piece of literature that's written by the director as the author, along with his collaborators. But there is that idea of the film should be read like a novel an author wrote. And if you start getting really big infrastructure and corporations involved, then the author idea is kind of compromised to some degree, I think.
What did you learn about yourself personally and professionally? Because you started out pre-pandemic, life was good, we're hugging each other, we're seeing everyone, and like you said, the fear, you're putting clothes into a suitcase, you're going to Oklahoma to protect you and your family. So what did you learn about yourself throughout this whole process, professionally and personally?
That's an excellent question. What do we all learn about ourselves, right? That's wow. That's a big one. But one thing I hope would be persistence. You know, I'm definitely I lack in a lot of areas, but I just have to some degree. I don't know why exactly, if it's some chemical imbalance or what, but I do have a thing when I get fixated on an idea, I keep going. And even though I may not be the sharpest tool in the whatever, the drawer or whatever, I latch on. So even with a worldwide pandemic, you know, following safety protocol, and obviously human life and health is where I would stop, but if there's any safe way to press on, I will do it, you know. So Lord willing, but I'll do my best to keep going.
You have a veteran theme with your character. Kind of a lack of options. What are you willing to do when all of your options have run out and you're good at one thing? Were you centered more on the veteran theme, or do you feel like that theme is for any man that comes across where your options are limited or you run out of them?
I think it's for just about everybody, really. I mean, I think so. I do. Obviously, I did a very short stint in private security and that kind of stuff, and I was with a lot of guys that were prior military, so I had a lot of exposure to that and to their journey with that, and one guy in particular, my heart just really went out to, and you know. Well, I won't give too much away, but Sonny, to some degree, was based on a man that I did know. Obviously highly fictionalized, but I just saw sort of what he struggled with coming back, and he was just such a great guy, just a really, really wonderful man, and yet he was just put in this impossible situation in combat and in war, and he was in Afghanistan, and then watching him come back and transition, and there's a lot of things that I'm sure he would have rather done, but because of his background, he didn't go to college, and because of his background, he just, you know, felt, well, it's got to be law enforcement, or, you know, he figured he just had one or two strings to his bow, and he just felt kind of stuck with that, and then just watching him struggle with all the sort of demons that come along with that. So I do appreciate, you know, our service people, and so I wanted to, you know, as a layperson, use my imagination to try to fill in the gaps of what they may go through transitioning. But it is everyone's story, and it's also a pandemic story, really, because everyone had to suddenly figure out how do I make things work based on all these restrictions we now suddenly have with everything. So I think hopefully it works on all the different levels with them. Yeah.
Seems like your faith played a big part in driving you during this pandemic and during the production of this film. So if you don't mind, talk to me a little bit about how your faith shaped your filmmaking style, but also how you work on a film set and how you manage these people during a very scary time.
Well, I am a Christian, and so my faith did inform. Hopefully, I hope how I interact with people. I hope, you know, that comes out, and how I manage. If it doesn't, then I'm doing something wrong for sure. But I don't so much make Christian films, but I am a Christian who is a filmmaker.
Right.
And so, but it can't help but work its way into my management style, the kind of stories I tell, how I approach a story, then just how I approach, you know, something like making a film during a pandemic. I know when I was driving to Heiko, I was location scouting. And I tried many times to get a large traditional crew for this film. So I really did. I had all kinds of really high-rate, you know, high-quality people that I was in contact with, and just one after the other, the door closed. It closed and closed and closed and closed. And I was thinking, well, I'm not going to just go out there with, you know, a camera and no support, no whatever. And but it just kept, you know, I don't know if you guys have probably seen High Noon, where Gary Cooper's like trying to enlist all this help because the bad guys are coming, and I'm calling in every favor I've got for a DP, for a sound guy, for, you know, grips, gaffers, all that stuff, and then, but one by one, all those doors kept closing, and then there was, as I was driving into Heiko, there's a ranch that had and I wrote it down, I don't remember, but it was a Bible verse from Chronicles, and it basically just says, you know, the battle's the Lord's, just get your armor on and show up, and then just wait for Him, see what happens, and trust Him. And so that's kind of, I realized after about, you know, 4 months of trying to get a crew together, this is either I'm going to go make this movie and just do it on faith, or I'm going to just give up and not do anything. And so I just went ahead and went for it. But then just every step of the way, it wasn't all at once, but every step of the way, whatever I needed would just be there. And I'd do something else, and it would be there. I need something else, and so all the way to through the pandemic. And so that definitely was encouraging to me to be making. And it felt so trivial to make a film during such a horrible time, you know. And that's something I did struggle with, like why. You know, because movies are fun, but they're make-believe, and so why would I do something like this during such a terrible time? And but then, you know, maybe especially during such a time, to give the distraction. You know, I don't know, give people something to kind of take their heads out of it for a while. But it definitely encouraged me to keep going during that dark time that we all went through. You know.
You mentioned your casting director a few times.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a bit about getting this Texas-based cast? I think Paul was you know, was one of the bigger name guys as the banker. I think Hugo worked with you previously.
He did, yeah.
What was it like getting this cast, and how hard she worked to make this happen through a pandemic as well?
Yeah, Keena Bell Reed and her company's Cast-O-Matic, and she's does most of her casting based out of Dallas, and so she's really tremendous. There wouldn't have been a film without the people she brought together, and it's amazing. I mean, I guess it sounds whatever, but the Texas talent is remarkable. It really is just a phenomenal talent pool here. And people with credits that are, when you start looking at their resumes, wow, all the tremendous background a lot of the Texas talent has. And so she was obviously the one that got all that put together. And I got Hugo Christian through her, which is this guy here, this tough guy in the middle. And Hugo, I just wrote that particular part for him because once you meet someone and you connect with them, and then you sort of develop that friendship and working relationship. As I was writing that, I was like, oh man, Hugo would be great in this. And so to the point where you paint yourself into a corner, because if you can't get that person, it's sort of devastating, because you know for 4 months when you're writing the script, you're picturing them. So, but yeah, Keena was great in getting all that talent, and then I wrote that specifically for Hugo, who I got through Keena originally. So, yeah.
Titles. Oh, okay. The title's Mexican Moon. You do have a lot of beautiful night shots. Can you talk a bit about capturing the scenery of the area, and that, I think someone else said it was a part of the story, and Todd said that. Like, how important was it to capture that Texas landscape and connect it, I mean, in the title as well?
Well, so my first film, Goodnight Charlene, I approached it like a stage play. And so some of the people that watched it hated that, and some people got it and they enjoyed it. But it was mostly shot in a soundstage with just real minimal set pieces, and I really I just wanted that to function like a theatrical play. You go to a degree to like a community theater and you're watching it. And so, but then for this film, I wanted to do 100% the opposite direction, 180 degrees, whatever, the opposite of that. And so I said, no, I want, like real rock buildings, I want real streets, I want real interiors, real sun, real moon shots and all that sort of thing. And so I did, that's where Heiko came in just wonderfully in that regard, and became a character after visiting Heiko just on a location scout. It's just, you walk around and you feel the history, the Old West history, and it's a remarkable thing. So it very much became a story about the place as well. And that grew out of my desire, like I mentioned, just to do something 100% on location. So there's no, unlike my first film, I approached this like just no sets, nothing. This is all real. But I think you can feel it, it kind of helps to set the stage, and so, and because I didn't have any A-list talent yet, as far as celebrities and names, that sort of thing, I had Heiko, which when you research that town, it's really a special place, has a really cool history, and that sort of became a celebrity unto itself, I think.
Speaking of Heiko, when you approach the city officials and the residents there to say, hey, I want to bring in a crew, I want to shoot my film today, because of its so quirky history with Billy the Kid, and of course they have that beautiful museum there with all the World War II memorabilia. Did they say, hey, you need to incorporate this, or would you incorporate this? Did they, anything like that?
Yeah, well, you would. The answer is not really, no. We did show this as a work in progress at the Billy the Kid Film Festival, which is every year. It's run by, like I mentioned earlier, Lucy and Phil Vasquez, who also own the RV park we shot at. And so it did connect to Billy the Kid as far as, that goes with the Billy the Kid Film Festival. We did just that work in progress there, the opening scene we premiered there. But no, they really were. Linda Stern was the other one I mentioned that was really instrumental in opening the town to us, and they got it. I just told them what it was about, and they just said, yeah, we get it. And so they let it take its own shape, and they didn't try to, well, if you could work in that this, this restaurant has really good apple pie, that'd be great. Kind of
Well,
a plug.
Oh, speaking of product placement.
Oh yes.
Two commercials that I remember seeing as a kid. The Fritos one and Pepsi. What was it?
It was 7-Up.
7-Up.
Yeah.
7-Up. So.
I love everything vintage and nostalgic, and so I came across those clips, and I really felt like that's just the colors, the everything. It set it. It's a little the film's set in 1980, so it is reaching a little bit further back than that. So I guess it would have been reruns probably in the film world it takes place in, but I just loved it.
Yeah.
I can give you a really impressive artistic reason. I just love it. I love everything vintage. But that being said, though, the Frito Bandito, there was some intentionality behind that, because it's just such a shallow caricature, and then you look at the depth of because we had a lot of Hispanic cast, specifically Mexican cast, and you look at the depth and the real person, the real characters, and I did want to juxtapose this shallow kind of stereotype with
Right.
and there was some intentionality behind that one.
Well, it provided some good laughs when it was needed. But also talk about writing for your Spanish speakers.
And that was very easy, because I would just write, "This happens in Spanish." And then,
Dios mío.
right, yeah, basically, dust off my 4 words. Yeah, I don't pretend to be fluent at all in Spanish, and so, but I knew Hugo Christian is a native Spanish speaker, and so I was sort of hoping. I knew I had at least one guy I could trust that I could be like, "Hey Hugo, is this?" And he went all the way with it. There's one particular. He actually improvised a little bit. There's a line where he's talking to the old man after he's died in the shack in the cemetery, and he talks about how this cowboy he's having this back and forth with. He likes a soldier's rifle. He doesn't like. You think he'd want a cowboy gun like John Wayne or something. But the Spanish phrase he uses is "cuerno de chivo," which means horn of the goat. And and so Hugo was telling me all of these, like, this is a very, very specific idiom for in Mexico. This especially with the cartels and like all that stuff, they would be like this. It's literally the horn of the goat, but they understood that to mean this is a gun, but this is a bad guy's gun kind of thing. And so there's all kinds of depth that he brought to to that I couldn't have scripted. So.
I was friends with Del, or I still am friends with Del Zamora, but he was in some Walking Dead stuff when I interviewed him when I was in Louisiana, and there's just a whole set of stuff that I talked to him about that. So I think it's really interesting you're taking that to Heiko right now.
Wow, yeah.
I think that's amusing. I really love the light. I loved the lighting. I loved the way you were using lighting. Was it a kid? Was it natural? What were you doing?
Well, I appreciate that. I was anticipating some criticism with my lighting style, because it's a throwback to the 50s and 60s is what it is. And there's the two schools of thought in cinematography is motivated light versus unmotivated light. And so the very popular thing the last 15 years, 20 years is, let me see how little light I can use to light this scene, and then it has to be motivated light. And so that's like, here we have all these light sources. They would want to replicate that. A director of photography now would want to replicate that. But if you watch old movies from the 40s, 50s, the 60s, they don't care. They'll throw a spotlight on a wall there's no way there's a spotlight on that wall, but they do it. And I kind of like that look, because to me it textures it, adds those layers. And so I used a lot of spotted light, like a Fresnel lens.
I think you might actually find some resonance in Arab and Indian film festivals. That's what I'm doing right now. From what you said from your father and everything earlier.
Oh yeah.
And all of Egyptology and all of that. And I'm thinking that maybe it's not Hollywood, but it's certainly got an international appeal.
Well, cool. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
So talk to me about cinema in your life. What films have influenced you as a person, but also to what films has influenced you as a filmmaker? Because you talk a lot about vintage and films in the 40s and 50s, and we see that in your filmmaking. So I'm wanting to know what has really influenced you.
Kurosawa is an enormous influence, and mentioning like international appeal. I mean, with Kurosawa, you could just turn the sound off and you could just watch it, and somehow you just get it. You know, there's something just so magical about being able to have what's called a film language in a way, right? It is its own language, and it transcends it transcends all the you know, geographical barriers, language barriers. So Kurosawa was a huge influence for me. I like Truffaut more. I like his theory, as far as, like I mentioned, the auteur theory, and he made some great films. But I'm kind of more attracted just to his philosophy of filmmaking. But of course, John Ford, who also is connected to Kurosawa, because John Ford was a big influence for Kurosawa, and you see that with Seven Samurai and how all that circles back. And when you really get, and I of course love the Western, which you know, John Ford as well, and a lot of others. But there's something very universal about that Western template that Kurosawa and John Ford were able to just cross-adapt. It's just so amazing how that works, and going from Magnificent Seven to Seven Samurai to, and so then Kubrick also is a huge influence for me. And you know, as far as personal influence, to some degree, I think we watch films or read novels because you're, in a way, like if you have a decision coming up in life or you're trying to figure things out, movies and art are in a way a blueprint, right? Like other people have gone that way before, and you try to kind of, almost, at least I do, you plug in where you're at in life and on the journey that the character's taking in the story, and you try to see, well, do I fit into this journey, and what decisions did they make, and how did that turn out for them? And so, all the same filmmakers I mentioned have affected me personally too, at different times in life, when you watch that blueprint happening on screen and see if you can relate to that in your personal life as well. So, but yeah, there are a huge list of inspirations that could go on and on.
How do you balance out as a filmmaker from not completely copying what you heard the people that influence you, but finding something similar to what they do that inspires you?
Yeah, I think a lot of juvenilia, whether it's an author or whatever, the first thing you do is copy everybody you love. And so I've been at it for quite a while, as far as just trying to, you know, practice writing, coming up with stories, kind of trying to hone my visual style. So over a period of time, I've distanced more and more from my inspirations, my influences. So hopefully at this point, it's just kind of naturally, there's a barrier now between me and them, because I've traveled my own path artistically at this point. But early on, yeah, in fact, when I just got out of OU, I worked on a golf course in my hometown, and I had saved up several $1,000s, and I was reading a biography of Kubrick, and he has like an Airflex 2C, type of like compact camera he has, and I saw that picture, and I ordered that camera, and I spent everything I had on it, and my dad was kind of like, I was like 20 years old. But he's like, that's an awful lot of money for a camera, and I just, wow, yeah, but look at this picture, it's Kubrick, that's what he used. And so, like, that should be obvious, why are you bothering me with such a silly question? But long story short, I was able to ultimately not purchase a camera, and the company was gracious and let me out of it, and I could keep my money. But yeah, there's definitely, I forgot about my initial train of thought on that. But. Inspirations, yeah. So I was trying to copy, thank you. I was trying to copy Kubrick at that point, to the point of like, I want this guy's camera. But then now, yeah, over the years, you do develop your own style.
I feel like every artist kind of does that. I mean, and that's how you find your voice. You copy what you think works, and then over time, you develop your own.
Hopefully that's how it works, yeah. I think so. I think if you keep at it. And that, of course, when I was in studying film at OU, and I guess to a degree it still is, but it was just like the Tarantino gangster thing, like that just, and I got bit by that bug for a couple of months, and then I was back to Kurosawa. Like I didn't travel that particular path, but I know that if you keep at it, I do think you hopefully do get away and get your own style.
So you're going to be on Amazon Prime. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So tell us about you getting that phone call or email, and what did you have to do to, get your film on Amazon Prime? Because that's kind of the dream of everyone now going through the festival circuit, is I want to get it on X, or Z, streaming service. So tell me a little bit about your secret there and getting that notification that it was a go.
Well, the secret is a company called Indie Rights. So that's my distributor in Los Angeles, and they're ultimately, they start off as independent filmmakers who started their own distribution company a while back. And so I submitted, they released my first film as well, so I submitted my first film to them, they accepted it. Then they accepted this film as well, and so it's through my distributor, Indie Rights, who has a relationship with Prime and Tubi TV and all the various streaming outlets, and so that's how it got on there.
What was your reaction when you got the email and the distributor said, hey, it's good to go?
I had sent it to Linda Nelson, she's one of the owners, and so that's who I usually deal with. And so I'd sent her a screening link of it, and then I didn't hear anything back. And then I was like, then of course my mind at that point, with all the angst of filmmaking, I was like, well, did I get the format off? Is it not? Did I forget to put the password for the screening link? And so then I called her, and she's always calm. I mean, this, based in the middle of the business in Los Angeles, nothing rattles her. She is very tough and very gracious and very calm. And so whenever she answers the phone, she just says, hello. And I said, hello, have you had a chance to watch the film? Well, not yet. And I said, well, I just want to make sure there's no technical glitches. And, oh, well, we'll check on that. And then about an hour and a half later, I got an email that they were going to take it. And then at that point, my reaction was just, a year of work, you're just you're trying not to think about that when you're making it, but it's building and building and building, and you're just hoping that comes through. So when that email came through, it was a blessing. It was a huge weight off my mind when they took it, yeah.
Well, we've got about 5 minutes left, so why don't you tell us what you're working on now?
So I'm developing, my initial hope was to make a crime fiction Texas noir trilogy. So I've got one more installment in that genre that I'm about a third of the way through writing right now. And we'll see what direction this one takes, but I definitely want to keep a similar setting, similar kind of aesthetic to the first two films. But I'm trying to decide if I want to go, try to attach a name the third time to the film, and someone kind of recognizable name. And I do struggle with that because it's, I mean, if it could, not so much the logistics of it, but just the ramifications for the story itself. When you get a recognizable face in there, it really, like I mentioned a while back, it's more rope to hang yourself with, because it opens a lot of doors, but then it closes a lot of doors in people's minds too, because they don't see, because you don't know who I am, you see my face and I'm Sonny Tripono, and you think, okay, that's Sonny Tripono. But then you see a recognizable face in a particular role, and it just kind of, it can affect it. So I'm still trying to work that out, but it will be something in a similar vein to this, and then I'll move on to science fiction maybe or something.
Going back to Heiko?
I would like to. Yeah, I would love to.
Are you writing this in hopes to go back to Heiko, or?
I would say that's the tentative plan, if it works out. Yeah, yeah. And they have there's one mural where there's a lot of murals out there, but where Barbara Lorion's character Mary is running toward me in that street, and you see that huge mural behind her. And they call them ghost murals, and they actually are modern replicas of aged vintage murals painted in 60 feet by 70 feet, huge brick walls. And they have those all over for batteries, for coke, for all that stuff in Heiko. And it's just like, who made this place? It's like a filmmaker's paradise. And the people are so gracious and down to earth. And there's I can't remember do you remember the highway that runs by it?
There are two.
There's two. Well, there's one main one,
yeah,
and it's just like the time evaporated and stopped on this side of the highway, and then the modern world continues on this side of the highway, and it's just such an amazing place to shoot. So yeah, if I can go back in time again, basically there, I would love to do that for the third one.
We have one final question. This one's just really for our outlet, since we're the nerd news outlet.
Mm-hmm.
It's something we like to ask all of our filmmakers. Just for our audience, if you could have a weapon of choice or a superpower from within the nerd universe to fight the forces of evil, what would you choose?
It would have to be a sword of some kind. I would say some sort of a sword that had no way to be countered. I would say.
Well, don't let my lightsaber microphone get into the anyway.
I wondered about that.
Yeah, that's how you know where you're talking with that nerd show. That's our filmmaking. We just drop condenser mics through a lightsaber.
Nice. It works, yeah.
It works. It doesn't light up. Also, it extends out for a boom mic.
Oh, that's awesome. Got the boom pole and everything.